Hello everyone. So I'm very excited today to show you the new stuff that we have in Formwork, but I have a few, I guess, an intro to go through first. So this is a mouthful title for the talk. You can thank ChatGPT for that. But what is Formwork? So Formwork is a project for building forms with Vue.js that I started last year, and I released the initial release for it early this year in January. And I have given a couple of talks about it since, and we have a lot of new stuff to show you. But first, let's talk about what is Formwork, what does it do? So you can think of form libraries specifically as a spectrum. So on one hand, you have stuff like VeeValidate, which I would say are low-level kind of libraries that give you ability to validate data, right? Rather than inputs. They don't really deal with UI, so that's a very low abstraction layer. That means it's very flexible. It means also that it is very, very lightweight. So that appeals to a lot of people, but the Spectrum has a lot of other libraries. So another library that this one I wrote, VeeValidate, is a little higher on the spectrum. So it concerns itself with some UI, but not really all the UI. So it is able to integrate with components or form elements and native form elements, and that's about it. But at the same time, it has awareness of the UI. This is because it's higher up in the abstraction layer and thus is able to do more for you. Now, there are other libraries like FormKit and ViewForm that are full-on components that you can just use in your application, and so they are even higher in the abstraction layer, and that means you can pretty much get going really quickly with them. They are really great, but at the same time, they are less flexible than a headless solution. So you can see right here that we have a gap. Of course, then you have UI libraries that offer the whole other kind of components, like tables and so on. But you can see here that there is quite a gap, and this is where Formwerk comes in. Formwerk tries to tackle most of what the UI libraries like FormKit and ViewForm and other UI libraries to tackle without really concerning itself with your markup and styles. So it doesn't have any UI, but at the same time, it is able to tackle accessibility, internationalization, interactions, and so on. And I think the way it does this is very unique in the Vue ecosystem, and we will see how does that work in a minute. But I'm not here to talk about what I talked about in previous conferences and previous appearances. You can check formwerk.dev and you can see all the components there, and you can build your own basically. So Formwerk basically promises that your UI is completely customizable by omission, meaning since it doesn't offer any markup, like 0 elements, 0 components, and so on, it also offers no styles at all. So that leaves you to use whatever styling mechanism you would like to use. Like you can use Tailwind, you can use native CSS, you can use open props, you can use whatever styling solution you prefer. Basically, we think that the UI is the most part that's subject to change in your code rather than the script. So the script for your inputs basically remains the same most of the time. However, your UI changes from project to another, and it is basically what carries the brand of your website or the application that you are working on. And so we think maybe we shouldn't touch that. That's the part that people try to override the most through slots, through props, and so on. So we are thinking, okay, let's not do anything there at all and do everything headless. So Formwerk only offers JavaScript. That means you are in full control over your styles and your markup. And then it also tackles accessibility. So it is able to implement the ARIA guidelines for every single input that we offer. And by just using our headless solutions, you can basically guarantee that your fields are accessible and interactable. So your users can basically have all the interactions that they expect out of that input. For selects, maybe it's a search or arrow keys, or maybe for calendars, maybe it's the arrow keys, and if it's right to left, then it was also able to support that, because Formwerk also tackles internationalization. And internationalization for us doesn't just mean translating strings. It also encapsulates the behaviors around directions, because when you are dealing with right to left languages, for example, most of the inputs still follow the same arrow keys. However, you should flip them as well. So we are able to adjust the orientation and adjust the direction for it as well. It also supports the numbers and custom dates for it, as you will see in a minute right now. Also, since VeeValidate has a lot of good FormDX in terms of dev tools, state tracking, validation, Formwerk also has these stuff and more. And yeah, we'll get a look at all of that in a minute. So what is Formwerk for? Who is it for? I would say if you are like me, someone who builds these inputs yourself and you like to build them. So Formwerk offers you like a very good baseline where you can guarantee certain things about your fields, like what I just talked about, but at the same time allow you to build a new UI each and every time that you don't have to override. And then it is also, I think, for library authors. So if you are building a library that you plan to open source, maybe you shouldn't deal with forms all over again from the beginning. Maybe you can just use Formwerk as a base layer for you, as a dependency, and it will help you get there, and you will get all the benefits of using Formwerk for your library. So these are the fields that we currently have. So text fields, number fields, radio buttons, checkboxes, combo boxes, select fields, sliders, switches, search, date, calendars, time, files, OTP fields, custom fields, and hidden fields. So basically almost everything we have at the moment ready for you that you can play with in the docs or build using Formwerk. But I'm gonna show you the new stuff that we released in the past few months, specifically the last couple of months. So let's take a look at the OTP fields. This is one of the new fields that we released, and Formwerk allows you to build it with such an ease. For example, this is all the script that you need to have. All you need to do is import the use OTP field and the OTP field slot component. Now you can build your own OTP slot component with use OTP slot composable. So everything, this is just a convenience component for you that you can use. But basically you define your props and that's it. That's all the script you need. And the rest is just a matter of building your own UI. I know it's kind of unclear how you would use these, but you are just able to bind these properties to the elements that correspond to them, and you are done. You get everything for free. Interactions and so on. And let's test some of these interactions. So right now I have this OTP field component, and if I start typing, like, it autofills until it's done, and once it's done, you can see the result is printed down here. If I click backspace like a few times, 6 times, it auto manages the focus for you, and it clears the field and goes to the previous one, so you don't have to do that. I'm sure, like, if you built this component before, it's very fun to build at first, and then you realize how much nuance it is and how many things that go into building such a component. For example, let's try a few different things. Let's reduce it to 4 digits length, and maybe you have a prefix like the Google codes and something like that. So you can do that with Formwerk, and it will understand that the first 2 slots can't be used. So it will do that for you, and yeah, it will fill it for you, and it will even add the prefix for you when you submit that field. So it really does everything for you out of the box, all the interaction, all the behavior without really touching the UI. So all of this is just stuff I build with Tailwind, so you can get it, it's really easy to use. Now you can force a few things like numbers only. So if I type characters, it doesn't work at all. If I type only numbers, then it works. And it also supports pasting. So if you are wondering, okay, can I paste? I copied 1, 2, 3, 4 from somewhere, and I pasted it, and it works. And it also supports filling it from the SMS you get on your phone. So it does all of that automatically for you. You don't have to figure all of that out. You just need to figure out your UI. That's about it when it comes to OTP fields. And secondly, we have time fields. So time fields are really, we already had date fields. Time fields is just a subset of it, so we also have it. And you can basically manipulate it with your interaction keys, like arrow up, arrow down, and you can fill it with numbers, and yeah, and you get validation as well. You can add the seconds, and you can switch to the 24 hours format. So again, you only need to do this in your script tag, import the use time fields, get the access to these props, and bind them to your elements, and you are done. Now, another more complicated field is the calendar field. Now, we had date fields and calendars before, but we didn't have the calendar on its own, which was something that was requested by a lot of people who used it. So calendars are really complicated to build because you have days, and days in the month aren't really stable because it depends if it's a leap year and so on. And if you are using different calendars, like here we are using the Gregorian calendar, but maybe you can use the Islamic calendar, and then it becomes even more complicated. So if you have worked with multi-language applications, this is a very common thing that you have to deal with, especially in the Middle East area. So this is something that a lot of developers from around this area have a lot of pain with. Like, it's really painful to adjust for all of that and parse these dates, send them to your backend, and so on. But Formwerk makes that super easy for you. And again, all you have to do is in your script tag is this. The rest is just a matter of rendering the UI that you need for this. Let's play around a little bit with the calendar field. So right now I will use the arrow keys to move the days, and it works as you would expect. I'll use the enter key to select the date. And again, you don't have to code the event listener for any of these. We handle it for you. And we can start playing around with the locale. Let's change to Arabic, and you have to take my word for it, but these are the days of the week, and this is the current month in Arabic. Maybe we can change the calendar as well, and we can use Islamic. And again, you have to take my word for it, but this is accurate, and it works as expected. There is also like something like Coptic calendars, and yeah, all of that works. Formwerk under the hood uses internationalized/state library, which is a project by React Area, but at the same time, we plan to switch to temporals once it has enough support in all browsers. So we actually have a PR ready for that, ready to go, and it's passing all the tests. So yeah, you can also do more with this. Like, you can switch to, let me switch to English so you can understand what's going on, or maybe German for German fans here. And yeah, if I can switch to month view by clicking on the date. So all of that's supported for you. But again, you have to kind of handle these cases. Like, you have something called the current view panel, and then you need to figure out which kind of values to show here. But the labels, the values, you don't have to deal with that at all. And then I can switch to a year, drill down, and select a day in a month. And building all of that is super straightforward. I will show you quickly what it looks like. I know I don't have a lot of space in my slides here to show you how it looks in the template, because the template is a bit involved, but at the same time, it's your UI. You can make it as complicated as much as you want to, or you can make it as simple as you want to. It depends on your needs eventually. Now let's take a look at the file fields. So file fields are really interesting to build because while they are really simple, they have a lot of nuances. For example, I can select a file right here, and then you need to remove it. So the native input field doesn't really allow you to do that, HTML. You need to kind of select it and cancel it. It's kind of like a trick, if you know it, you know it. And if you don't, then, so Formwerk does that for you. You can remove files specifically if you want to, because it kind of implements its own way of storing these files, and it also allows for having multiple files. So something like that. And it has some support for uploads. File fields are really like one of the latest fields that we have. So they are not really mature yet, and we aren't really sure how people will use them, because files are really complicated, because you can either submit them directly to your backend as a form encoded kind of a form data kind of an object, or you can send it to your backend that pre-signs a URL for you that allows you to upload it directly on S3. Then it gives you an ID that you can use as a media key. So it's really files are really complicated. We have support for both these use cases, but we are still figuring things out around types and around validation and how that would work. But you got basic support for these, and it works really well. File fields also, the same composable allows you to build drop zone file fields. So you can actually just, the only difference is you grab something called the drop zone props and you bind it to the container, and you just get the drag and drop handling automatically for you. Let me try to drag something really quickly and see if it works. And now I'm dragging it, and yeah, it works, and it handles the preview for you as well if the file is previewable. So if it's an image, if it's a video, it kind of allows you to easily preview these. Again, I'm not sure if this is the right thing we need to handle or not, but at the same time, it's still early for these fields, and they will mature as we get more feedback and as more people use them with different use cases. So yeah, that's about it for the new fields, and we have a roadmap. But before going into the roadmap, I would like to show you something else that we are working on. So let's say we are trying to build a multi-step form from scratch, and at first it will be a little nuanced because, okay, what do we need to get a form step? Well, we need a form. So we have that, and maybe we have of course, the Copilot is trying to take over, and maybe we can have like a couple of buttons that we might be able to use, like a, let's have a quick button here, previous button, and a next button. So now we are getting some buttons here, and then you need to kind of get some fields in, right? So let's get something like an input type text, and this is kind of maybe your, let's make it an email, like this is your email field. Then maybe we have a text area that's your like address, and so on. So it's a bunch of steps. Then you have the current state, right? Like you can start by doing something like a current step equals maybe a ref because we want it to be reactive. So maybe it starts with zeros and it increments every time we press on the next. But then you quickly realize there is a lot to build here. Like we still need to have maybe the, if it's the last step, we need to submit rather than prevent the submission. If it's, what if each step has validations for it? How are we collecting the data for these steps, and so on. So it's a little more nuanced. And something we are working on right now that will make all of this easier, and let me show you how quickly it is to get something like that going. So basically we need a composable because all Formwerk offers is a bunch of composables. So we have a composable in the making called use step form flow because there is a tapped form flow. And basically it gives you access to a few things. So we have form props that we need. And yeah, Copilot's kind of spoiling the surprises here. We have the next input props, we have the previous button props, and we have on done. And yeah, maybe that's good enough for now. So let's start putting these together. And I have a few notes here to make it quicker so I don't take much of your time. So let's do that. It looks like I need the last step, so it is offered for you. And now we kind of start to have something going on here. Again, these are all my UI. These are all my my own UI. Like it just adds attributes for you that makes things accessible and makes things a little easier to handle with listeners and so on. If we take a look at the elements here, I'm not sure if you can see it, but let me zoom in a little bit more. You'll notice that it disabled the previous button for you, even though we have no binding for the disabled property. This is one of the stuff that previous form props does. It disables the step for you if it's the first step. And same thing for the next one. But let's do more. Let's do a little bit more here before we dig deeper. We can do a little bit more here. But first thing we need to do is we need to define our steps, right? Like, so how would you go around doing that? UseStep form exposes for you something called form step, which is a component. It's a headless component. So we can use it to declaratively start declaring our fields, our steps. And since we already use Formwerk for all the inputs we have here, so I have an input text, I have an input text area, and so on, I will just use them. And let's start with the first step. Maybe it's an input text, and yeah, it's a name, sure. Let's make sure to import it. And then maybe an email as well. So if we do that, and it's not working for some reason. Well, it was working right before here, but you know how it is with yeah, now it works. Sorry. So I forgot basically to bind the form props, which is what you need to do here because it's able to locate the steps within that form for you. So yeah, disaster averted, I guess, for the demo. You don't need to provide an ID. So we now have our first step. Let's add the second step. So second step might be the address. And let's make sure to import it. And now notice that it immediately updated the isLast step for you automatically. So now it's using the next label for it. And let's try to maybe, we don't have any validations going at the moment. So if I press next, it'll just go next. If I press previous, it'll go previous. But notice that I didn't code any of these interactions. So this is what Formwerk does for you automatically. But let's try adding some validation here to make it a little more functional. So maybe we have for the first step, we have a Zod object that uses these. And yeah, I think that's suitable for the first one. For the address can be a string, yes. And then you can pass the schema for each step. And now if I try to submit, it should, yeah, now you get validation errors, and if it won't allow you to go to the next step unless you make this one valid. So now I'm almost at the last step. I'm at the last step. If I click submit, kind of nothing happens because I haven't handled it. You notice we have an onDone callback here. So I can use that and then, yeah, console log it. We use something called a consumable data object because it allows you to convert it to multiple formats, either form data that you can send directly to your backend, or to JSON if you need a JSON compliant object, or to object, which is a JavaScript object. I think JavaScript objects are mostly the common thing that you will be using. So let's try this form again. And now we are at the last step. Again, I can go back, I can go forth, and it will fill the values for you depending on the values that it had before. So all of the state management, everything is done for you. Don't have to think about it. And once I click submit, notice that we have them right here. This is kind of what Formwerk does, basically. Let me take a quick look with you for the other fields. Let's maybe take a look at the calendar. What does it look like? And again, this is the same script that I showed you guys. This is all the script that we need for all of the calendar stuff to work. Then all I need to do is just bind things. And yeah, I can make it as complicated, as complex as I want it to be, or as simple as I want it to be. And I think this is pretty much it for my demos, but let's quickly show you the roadmap. So we plan to finish multi-step forms by this month. I'm not sure yet. There are still a few unanswered questions there. We plan to have something called starter kits, which like our components pre-built for you with Tailwind and native CSS, so you can kind of drop into your projects, or you can use them as a starting point for your work. And then we plan to have the first release, full release at the moment. People already use Formwerk in their production, so it's safe. You can use it if you want to, but we really want to have V1 once everything is ready. So stay tuned for that. I think we have locked the features that we want right now for all these starter kits and multi-step forms. I don't think we'll fit anything new in, but we'll continue to improve on every single input depending on your feedback and your ideas, your suggestions, and so on. You can check everything and the documentation, the demos, and everything at formwerk.dev. So if you would do that, you'll find a lot of more information than I showed you, because it's a little more nuanced than that, but the examples take you step by step and show you all the features of every single input that we have. This is it for me. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope you enjoyed watching these. And I know some of these components are really annoying to build, because I have built them multiple times, many times, infinite times. And there is always something missing, something that I forget, something I didn't test, something someone will find eventually, and then you'll have to maintain it. And that's why people use UI libraries, but at the same time, I think you don't have to compromise between having your own UI or having to override other people's UI. So yeah, thank you so much, and I think I'm done.
Thank you very much for your lovely presentation. It's always a pleasure to hearing from you. You always have something new to present. We do have a few questions from you, so maybe we can start. Someone is asking, you created Formwerk for Vue.js. What inspired you to build a headless from library with a focus on compatibility and accessibility?
Because like looking at the spectrum that I showed in the at the start of the talk, you always have to choose between a headless library that only does validation or maybe like state management for you, or a UI library that handles these aspects like the accessibility and the internationalization. And this is kind of like, it started as an experiment, like can we get just a composable API, a completely headless API, to be able to handle the internationalizations and accessibility and interactions, while like its library is kind of blind, like it doesn't see your UI, it doesn't know how your UI looks like, but at the same time, is it able to do these things for you? And the answer was yes, like it can do most of these for you, because there are patterns that you have to stick with, and this is what the library capitalizes on.
Thank you very much for this answer. Someone else is asking, how do you handle complex validation scenarios with Formwerk?
Since this library is still relatively new, so right now it supports standard schemas. So it means you can validate with Zod, you can validate with Valibot, or you can validate with Archetype or any other library that implements the standard schema interface. And now you can write as complicated schemas as you want to with Zod. Like Zod supports pretty heavy and pretty complex validations with discriminated unions and so on. So you can just build your own schema. Formwerk will do it, will handle it. It's not something within Formwerk really capabilities. Like it doesn't do anything special. It just passes the fields to the schema and just gets the errors, assigns it to fields, and so on. So I think for the most part it would work, unless someone can find an edge case, really weird edge case, and then create an issue for us and we'll handle it.
Amazing. And we have one last question for you. What are the performance benefits of a headless form library?
I think performance isn't like better with necessarily headless libraries or headful, or I don't know what to call the opposite of it, like libraries. I mean, performance depends on how the source code was written. Formwerk focuses really, like, has a huge concern on performance, because like if you have form fields with 300 inputs maybe, and people would be like, that's a bit too much, but most government or bank or like forms don't really care about the form limits, so they will have these kinds of inputs. So Formwerk is actually tested against really crazy forms. I think 400 in production right now, and it works really well because we have a really, I would say, a unique something called a form transaction system that kind of tracks the changes without really storing anything in memory. So it's memory efficient, it's really fast, and it's kind of very lazy. So it's as performant as we can get with forms, I believe. But you can find UI libraries that are maybe more performant because now they own their UI, so they don't have to make any assumptions like we do. So I don't think it's a specific thing to headless libraries that they are faster or better than other libraries, but yeah, it depends.
Thank you very much. And for the audience that may have more questions, please find Andel on social media. I'm sure he would love to help you out, share your feedback. I know that he would really appreciate that. And once again, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.